you for joining us again for Latina Leaders Rising. Latinas are making great changes and they're wonderful leaders across this country. And today we have a very special one with us. Mary Ann Gomez Orta, one of my dearest friends, who for 13 years has been leading CHLI, the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. And we're so happy to hear about her work, but also let me tell you a little bit about her, because Mary Ann comes from us from the corporate sector, but she saw the light and decided to lead this incredible national organization. She's done marketing for the Coors Company and also for McDonald's. So she has that corporate experience. She might talk a little bit about that. But she's also a college professor. One thing that makes Mary Ann such an incredible leader is that she does her homework, she reads her book, she knows about leadership. And she's also a coach. So she wants to help individuals also become leaders. So welcome, Mary Ann. I'm so happy to have you with us.
Thank you. Big old virtual hug, Juana. Yay.
Yeah, we all need virtual hugs. Well, Mary Ann, we usually start with people's origin stories. You know, there's a lot of superheroes out today, and what's important, and we are superheroes, is our origin story. So tell me a little bit about you. I know you were born in California,
Yep.
and now you're working in Washington, so you go back and forth. But tell me a little bit about your family and your Mexican heritage.
So, yes, so I am American of Mexican heritage. My dad came to the United States from Mexico in the guest worker program and the bracero program. Met my mom, who was born and raised in Texas. They met working in the fields of Chico, California, a super sexy
Chico.
spot, a super sexy spot to me. And we were all five of us were born and raised in a farm worker camp outside of Stockton, California.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what that was like.
So anybody that tells you that working in a farm worker camp was cool and sexy is wrong. So, the thing about it is that while you're in it, sometimes you don't appreciate different things, right? So growing up in a farm worker camp, I used to tell people that we were 45 minutes away from civilization because that's how long the drive was to get to like the center of I-5 and Charterway at the time growing up. It was actually kind of cool because all the people that you kind of grew up with were all the same, right? We're all different farm workers, different families. The management were all Japanese American. We had some Italian ranchers on another island. We had Portuguese ranchers on another island.
Wow.
Oh, but this is all the Delta. Our principal and vice principal of our Ringe Elementary School were Japanese.
Well, did your family migrate or mainly stay in Chico?
So my family moved, my parents met in Chico, but then they moved to Stockton, California. So they moved south from Chico to Stockton, and my dad just really loved the area. My dad comes from a family in Mexico where agriculture was big. They were big on avocado orchards. And so he just really liked the area. And so
Well, it's true, that Chicanos and Latinos have picked the food for people's tables.
Yeah, and
And
still
that's
do.
and
you know,
still do.
still do.
Um,
California is the biggest state. And if it was its own country, it's, the biggest state or the biggest country that still feeds a lot of people around the world.
right.
And so, what I like
So
about
even though what I hear is that even though it was tough and the work was hard, there was a sense of community
yes, I was
and
gonna
people
say that,
knew
yeah.
each other and I guess they kind of took care of each other.
You definitely, you looked out for each other, you took care of each other, you were, there was just a lot of love. There was always a lot of love, a big sense of community. And so, that's kind of the environment that I grew up in. I didn't realize how poor I was until I went to high school,
Yeah.
and then I realized, oh my God, we're poor. Like, and then later on, when I applied for college at the University of the Pacific and you had to fill out that big old fancy FAFSA form, right? It asked you for your parents' annual income from the previous year. It was $19,000.
Wow. For
Mom
5
and
children.
dad, mom and dad's joint income raising 5 of us kids on a farm worker camp was $19,000.
Wow.
And so, you just there's a lot of things that you don't realize when you're a kid. in different environments, or maybe that was just kind of part of being in a farm worker camp. So, um, we're very blessed in my family. Both my mom and dad understood the value of education. And so
Mhm.
all five of us have a college degree.
I know
And
that's almost a miracle.
yeah, yeah,
And I feel that way myself, when we look at our lives, because and for some of the younger Latinas that are listening, it may be your grandmother or your grandparents, but we've overcome so much and we hold on to our values of
right.
family, community, and generosity and hard work. But when you look back, our strength comes from all of these challenges that we've overcome and that sense of determination that our
Yeah.
parents.
Determination and obviously here in the United States, right, we have one of the things I love about the Hispanic culture here is that we all come from different countries of origin. We came for different reasons. Our parents came for different reasons, our grandparents or what have you. And that really makes it very rich. But I think that regardless of whether you're a first or second generation, there's always been at some level, in some way, grit, right?
Mhm.
And I think that when you start to lose the grit and whatever it is that you want in your life or your talents or your community, whatever it is, you gotta have some grit. Because
Well, the other thing that I
that's
think is really interesting about Latinos, people talk about white privilege, but Latinos, we've earned everything we have. That's the thing
yeah,
about Latinos. Nobody gave it to us. We've all worked hard. Our parents have worked hard, and hopefully the younger generation can look and see, wow, through their hard work, determination, and grit, we got to where we are. And
right.
that's what's going to take me to the next level because I'm counting on the next generation to move us up to the next
Yes,
level
yes.
where Latinos really
So am
are
I.
the leaders of this. Yeah, let's
Yes,
cross this
yes,
out. That
yes.
Latinos really
Yeah,
are the leaders of this century because our country needs us too.
right,
Well, when
right.
you look back on your childhood, and I again I know your parents must have had such determination to have all five of their children go to college, and become middle class, which was their dream. I always say we're the dreams of our parents.
Yeah,
This
totally.
is what they dreamed about. But what about a specific memory from your childhood or your journey that really impacted you? Then you can look back and say, that was one time when I took kind of a step towards being a leader or an advocate.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm the eldest of five. My dad's the eldest of eight, and my mother is the second eldest of eight. So I didn't really have a choice. I was kind of born into like the rank of just, here you are, here's a leader, go be in charge, you
Well,
know.
but for
Um,
people listening, the place you have in your family does determine a lot.
it does, right? It does. So one, there's a lot of kind of built-in responsibility in that, but really there was one moment really that really just kind of got to me then and still does when I think about it. And that is that I still say baby sister, she's a grown woman with children and married, but when my sister was notified, the family was notified via a letter in English to a farm working camp with mainly people who only spoke Spanish and didn't read in Spanish, also even less
Yeah,
than English.
right.
And so the letter basically said, starting this next school year, you're going to have to be going to a different school. And basically, I took on the elementary
And
school
how
board.
old were you?
I was, what was that? I was, I think a senior in college. I was in college. And yeah, I think I was in college or had just somewhere around that time. I'm trying to remember the exact year now. Um, but I was furious that this didn't to me it just didn't make sense. It didn't make
Mhm,
any sense.
mhm.
It didn't make any sense to my mom and dad. And so I convinced my mom and dad that we needed to take on the elementary school board and challenge why were they doing this? What happened? Long story short, I wrote, some of you may know, for some of you who don't know, my dad had a Royal typewriter at home. I typed out a 3-page letter, actually 2 pages. This was a letter about the complaint that we didn't understand, blah, 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 blah. The second half of the third page was everybody I carbon copied, from the state senator to the Congress members to the school board, of two different schools to the, labor unions, farm worker groups, everybody that I knew of or could think of, right? I sent
Mhm.
out the letters. We went through this whole process of actually being addressed by at a board meeting by the school board. They wanted us to talk about what happened. Turns out that the principals from these two elementary schools in the Delta, they made a deal with each other and said, I'm kind of tired of your bus coming around this route. Why don't we do this? You take the kids from this side, and I'll take the kids from this side, and we'll just send them a letter and tell them that when the new school year starts, this is where you're going to go to school now. So a lot of the board members on the school board where my sister was at, they didn't even know that that had gone out.
Mhm.
And so the real cool part was I got a phone call from the state senator's office saying it's been brought to the senator's attention. He wants us to investigate this. He wants us to know what's going on. I shared over different meetings and conversations on the phone. And then 2 weeks before the classes started, the office from the senators, the staff called me back and said, we have been following this. Our understanding is that your sister and everyone is going to be able to be picked up by the same bus that's always been picking them up. And if that bus doesn't show up, the senator wants you to call our office back. So
It happened.
my sister went to the same school. She was able to graduate with all her friends from 8th grade. After that, they followed the formal process that you had to do in a school district to do the redistricting is basically what they were doing.
Mhm.
And I learned, Juana, the power of one family.
Oh.
I learned the power of one family, of one person.
Mhm.
And so to this day, I always say the power of one person and one family, that matters. That
Wow.
matters.
Yeah. Well, what a great beginning to your incredible career as an advocate.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about leadership, but when you're talking about Latino leadership, we have to be advocates because we're marginalized people. We're still subject to institutional racism. And so advocacy is just an integral part of our leadership. I call it Si se puede leadership. Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
and for us, like I said, in our family, education was super important. And
Of
that's why
course.
now,
That was
you
your
know,
ticket out of the migrant camp.
yeah, and even now, with the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, we have internships, fellowships, we have leadership conferences. I know that's not easy. I know that's not easy to fill out the applications and put all your little heart and soul in that application and send it in, and hopefully you get accepted. And there's a lot of people that support these kinds of programs, a lot of sponsors, and education is important. And one person, one intern in our program impacts not just their life, it's the life of their family, their community, their trajectory to improve and do better. And so I know personally what that means.
Right. Well, I also think it's important for our women who are listening to, we've talked about destiny and purpose and being on purpose. And one of the ways you know what your purpose is to do what you just did, is to reflect back. How did I get started? And where was it pointing me? It was pointing you towards education. It was pointing you towards advocacy. You now work with Congress people in Congress. It was pointing you in working with the leadership or the establishment. It was pointing you in doing your homework. You sat there and did a 2-page letter. Leaders have to do their homework. We got to have our facts.
Right.
So one of the ways to really know if you're on target with your purpose is to reflect and look, where did I make an impact? How did I get started?
Yeah.
And that's just
really
such
important. It's really
that's
important.
such a beautiful story. So when you think about, because I think about how many Latinos are in the migrant camp and some of the things that we've had to do in order to get to where we are today. What are some of the things that you think make Latinos such great leaders? And what are some of our values that you think you hold so dear?
I think the combination is, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, right? I think there's that grit. We're also overall, we're very attuned with diversity. We're very in tune with, where people come from, different cultures, different backgrounds, different faiths. It's just really interesting,
Yeah.
and I think that part of it is that we have grown up with a lot of diversity. I mean,
Right.
even among us, right? We don't use the same words sometimes to describe the same things. We have, we all have rice and beans and of different kinds, right? Some like pinto, some like black, some, there's, I think part of it is that we've been used to doing so many different things and are used to living in that environment that we don't even realize anymore that the power that we have because we have this richness of diverse points of view based on different lived experiences. And I think that understanding different languages and countries of origin really makes us a collective superpower. And sometimes we don't see that. Now, of course, we don't see that, and it's hard because, like, when I was growing up, I was discriminated against all the time, and so were my mom and dad. I mean, I remember walking into a store and my mom and I just saying something in Spanish, and the lady comes all the way toward me and asks me, you know, if we're shopping in the right store
Hmm.
in English, right? And it's just so there's all these different things, right? And so our lived experiences sometimes have hurt so much that we sometimes don't realize the superpower that's under the cape.
Yeah, and I think that sense of compassion that we get, like when you saw that happening with your mother, or you saw your sister, or different people being, it's not even maltratado or mistreated, ignored in some ways, or underestimated, or not valued. But I
Right.
think that really helps us tap into our compassion. Because another thing about our culture is that we're a humanistic culture. People, relationships, family, community, that's where our heart is. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of these experiences that we've had really allow us, to reach our hand out to people that have need.
Oh, totally, totally. Yeah, because we're used to it. We're
Yes.
used to holding space for each other. We're used to coming in and helping, like Latinas, in general, I think that we're the peacemakers, we're the home builders, we're the partnership makers, we're the problem solvers, and does it mean it's easy? No, but we've done that, right?
Right.
And we hold each other accountable. We hold each other up. We pick each other up. We push when we have to push. And so because we've done all these different things, I think people on the outside don't know how to deal with that magic, right? They don't
Mhm.
they don't they don't know how to deal with it because they've never been exposed to it. They don't have those experiences. So I think a lot of times I think there's opportunities for us, like you said, and the compassion being the empathy part of it is to be able to say, okay, wait a minute. Somebody's saying this about me or my community or my culture, whatever it might be. How do I use this for good? How do I take the time to show this person or this group or whatever that there is something else? How can I take this as an opportunity to educate? And again, maybe because that's the teacher in me
Right.
that wants to help teach people instead of just saying, yeah, keep being disrespectful, because that's not right.
Yeah. Well, I also want to put a leadership cap on this, because when you look at, first of all, the fact that we're so diverse and inclusive, and I call it the bienvenido spirit, welcome.
Yeah.
Half the kids in the United States under 18 now identify as multicultural. The multicultural age is coming, folks. Get your Latino self ready to lead, because we are the multicultural future. That's who we are. And then when you look at leadership, leadership is a people business. Who's better
Yeah.
with people than Latinos? Who's better at collaborating and getting things done through your family, your community, a group, a team? That's us.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I really want, people to really start thinking about the whole thing about advocacy and change. Leaders look at the future. The leaders look at what they have to do, and they say, how can we do this better? Or what's the vision for the next level?
Right.
And so I really believe, as you know, everyone here, that we were trained for leadership.
Yes.
Whether you're talking mi casa, su casa, and our generosity, leaders have to be generous. We are the leaders of the future, and you are the perfect example of someone who really is setting that path and bringing others along. Tell us about your internship programs, because those are dear to my heart.
Yeah, so we have what we call the Global Leaders Internship Program, and we bring college students. So anybody listening, if you're a college student or you know someone, we bring college students to Washington, D.C., and they spend 2 months in the spring or the fall semester interning for a member of Congress. And then after that, they
Oh,
spend,
wait, I want to emphasize that
yes,
interning for a member of Congress.
yes, yes. And then after 2 months there in that office, you're transferred to intern with a corporate office. Here in Washington, it's our external affairs, government relations, federal affairs office. The idea is that you get exposed to the public service side of it and the private sector. And you can really see how those two work together because, like it or not, all the major decisions are made out of this town. And it's important
I
that
don't like it.
everybody
I don't like
understand.
it.
Hey, there's some decisions I like, some that I don't like either, but it's important to know how this works.
Right.
And a lot of times in our communities, we are not encouraged, whether it's by immediate family or others, to maybe go into public service or go into the corporate setting because, depending on your country of origin and where your family came from, working for the government may not be the place that you want to go, right?
Right.
And then the other is that some people feel that working in a big company is not really the place to be if you're looking for change, advocacy, or public servant leadership or anything like that. And there's a place for everybody. But the idea is that we expose Hispanic college students to these two types of settings. And then the whole time they're here, we introduce them to other leaders of all backgrounds while they're here.
Oh,
So,
wait, tell me, you don't have to do a name if you don't want, but tell me about one of your interns that really took this training and is now doing what you would say great things.
So one of our stars is someone who we recognized a year ago. I guess it was a year ago. So we had an intern, part of the first year that I was with the organization 13 years ago. She was an intern. She ended up staying with the congressional member on the Hill. She ended up working for someone else on the Hill. She went back to her home state, and Charlotte Mena is now a state representative in her home state of Washington, and she's now an elected official
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's
doing
really
doing great
beautiful.
things in the community.
Well, congratulations on all that work, Mary Ann, because
Yep.
because the internship really is a star program. Tell me a little bit about how you feel that you identify today. I mean, because we're changing so much with intersectionality and young people. Many of our young people are now bicultural or multicultural. My grandson's Afro-Latino because his father's Black, and my daughter Carmen's his mom. But how about you? How do you identify and what's changed?
I guess for me, it's really I honestly identify the same way I think I always have is, American of Mexican heritage.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then, but when I'm making decisions, when I'm thinking about, where I need to be, what the priorities are, for me or my family, I go back to the way that I was raised. I go back to being raised in a farm worker camp and, what people needed and what are the resources that they don't have and just because we've got, this cool technology and we can do meetings like this and programs with, websites and .com and cell phones, we still need a human touch.
Right.
We still need that. And so I think it's important to kind of keep the humanity part of it still. So I'm a big connector, as you know, Juana, and I'm like I said, I'm American and Mexican heritage, very proud of that. I'm bilingual. Spanish was my first language at home. I learned English at school. And, there's other people that weren't raised that way. But, that doesn't make them more or less Latino or Hispanic or however they identify. With the organization that I lead, right? We call it CHLI for short. Look, we have senators, we have House representatives, we have people who are Hispanic, we have people who aren't Hispanic. We have people from different races. I mean, that's part of the idea. The idea with the founder the Honorable Lincoln Diaz-Balart, and our chairwoman, the Honorable Ileana Ross-Layton.
And
We
these
all
were
say,
Congress people from Florida, right?
right. So Ileana retired in
She
2000,
was the first Latina elected to Congress.
the first Latina in 89 to Congress. She's also a teacher as well. She started as a teacher. And we all say that, part of being and being inclusive in the organization, even if we have programs that are really more focused for Hispanic students, is the idea that we want everybody to sit at the table. We
Yes.
want you to sit with us, and we want you to learn from us, and
Mhm.
we want you to feel, trust in us, just like we want to be, trusting and with you. So I think it's, to your point, we're like very much the bienvenido group. We embrace that diversity. We don't shy away from it. And the more and more that the generations become more and more bicultural, biracial, multi-religion, all these kinds of things, it's important that we understand how to get along. That doesn't mean you're
Exactly.
going to agree all the time, but we got to figure out how to get along.
Yeah. Well, and I think, there's a concept of making the table rounder or larger and
Right.
including other people.
Yeah.
It's not a question and I think this is hard for some people to understand, particularly if you come from the dominant culture, because it's called the dominant culture. We don't want a dominant culture. We want as many people as possible at the table. We want to share power. We want to share resources. We want to share the fruits of our labor, and I think that's a hard concept right now in America to understand that diversity means everyone.
Everyone, and it's one, and it's not just here in the United States. Look around the world. We really are truly a global community. People come and go from one country to the other. Education is available in different forms and fashions around the world as well. People are doing well, and there's a lot of people who aren't around the world. So,
Right.
it really truly is about sharing, and
Mhm.
making it a better place for everybody.
Mm. But I think we do have to reinforce that message because change is hard and we
It
are
is.
going through a transition of power.
Yeah, right.
So we have a ways to go. But in this century, Hispanics will have the same impact that women are having at this point in time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because we are, if you want to call it, we are beginning to assert our identity, to move into positions of power, and also we now have an intellectual class. My mother had a fifth grade education. Your parents weren't educated, and yet all five of your siblings are. And
Right.
and so now we have the intellectual power and experience. You worked for McDonald's. You worked for Coors. You've taught. So we have what it takes now to lead. And this
Right.
is the first generation that can do that. So that's why this series is so important. One of the things I wanted you to talk about, because you're such a great teacher, were the rules of power for Latinas that you kind of promote and talk about. And I think that would be really great for our women that are listening to tap into.
So sure. So I jotted down. Five. I can go through them kind of quickly. The ones that I use as well when I coach. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and again, trying to just to help everybody. One of them is to lead with empathy and emotional intelligence. To really use your ability to understand and connect with people. We talked about it already.
That's perfect. That's what Latinas do.
But we do it. So, be more intentional about it. Two is know your audience. Look, we've talked about this, right? We know how to adapt. So you need to also learn and how to adapt. Are you communicating in a certain style with colleagues in a corporate environment, in the community? Are you meeting with elected officials? Because look, we all know, right? Talking to a significant other and the children is very different. Right.
Right.
So, one of them is, so basically know your audience and really be intentional about how you communicate, and also remember that words matter in that. And
Well,
then
I do want to
very
pop something
thoughtful
in
about the word we
about
use.
know your audience, which I think is really important. In servant leadership, it's not just know your audience, but know their needs and their priorities.
Yes.
It's
Mhm.
the leadership is really based on other, not self, and what do people need. So when you talk about your audience, whether it's a team that you're working with, or you're a teacher and it's your students, or you're working in a store and your customers are coming in. What is it they really need? How can you be most helpful to them? So I think not only knowing your audience, but knowing how to serve your audience.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you, Juana. The other is to, and this really comes up more on the, when you're moving up, when you're really looking to, we talk about the frozen middle in corporate America, women trying to really move up, and Latinos and Latinas trying to move up, and they're kind of stuck in the middle. And so this is really more about that, and that is to be seen and heard. Obviously,
I
it's
love that.
seen and heard in a very respectful manner, but it's basically about really leading into your confidence and using your confidence to express your ideas and your opinions. It's important that it's not just about, oh, I'm going to work really hard and I will be noticed or I will be recognized for the hard work. That's not how things work. It really is more about making sure that you are understanding the space and that you provide and you contribute. And so it's important to be seen and heard, whatever role that you're in.
And I do want to add a little Latino footnote there. A lot of Latinos are humble and they don't want to, toot their own horn in a sense.
Right.
And when I coach women, I say, do it for the other Latinas that are coming after you. Do it for women, do it for your team. Make yourself known, because if you are a good leader, then you should assume the leadership role.
And to follow up a little bit on what you just said, it's also not about like, oh, I don't have that title, so I can't contribute. No. It is not about a title. It is not about a title. It is making sure that you are completely contributing into whatever position you're holding at the time. And that means that you need to be able to contribute. Not just be quote unquote the hard worker. The other is, and this may be,
I'm going to jump in here. Add value to your organization.
Yes.
So in corporate America, it would be bottom line.
Yes. So this next one here is about money. Know how the organization or company or wherever you work, know how money is made in that organization. So I tell people, you need to know two things related to money. You need to know where you're working. How does a company make money? How are you contributing to that? And two, how can you help the company save money? It's kind of like in your own house, right? Mm-hmm. You need to know where do you save money and what you do with the money that's coming in and where is it coming in from. And people in any situation are going to notice that you are paying attention to the financials. You don't have to be an accountant. You don't have to be a super economics person, but learn about the money, because the other part of it is that, collectively or historically, I should say, we haven't always learned about financial literacy. And so that's important that we understand, what do we do with money? Here in this country, there's different ways to invest. There's different things that we can do with the money. It's not quite the same maybe in other countries where we came from or where our families came from, but it's important to know the dollar amount. How is an organization, where do I contribute and how do I help add value also from a financial standpoint, because your job is holding a position that's contributing. And so it's important to kind of know how to read those reports.
Well, and I also think because a lot of my work was in the nonprofit sector, and nonprofit staff can be ambassadors into their community.
Oh, always.
All of that, they can serve on nonprofit boards, they can volunteer, and they're actually adding to the bottom line because they're giving visibility and credibility to the organizations that they work at. So it doesn't matter whether you're in the corporate sector where the bottom line is really matter, or whether you're working in a school where community outreach and bringing the parents in. That's social capital. That makes your school better. And that helps with, because I know parents who got so involved in the school that they started doing fundraisers and and they started doing what do you call it when they put stuff up for bid and stuff?
So they did auctions.
They had auctions. They would cook food. All that attributes to the bottom line, and also to staff morale. So I think it's kind of like, be engaged in the organizations or in the nonprofits and the businesses that you work in. See yourself as a person that has that kind of
Yeah, it's ways
efficacy.
to learn. It's ways to learn. No matter where you're going to go, and I tell my staff this too. Just to your point, just because we're a nonprofit, I mean, we need to be good stewards of the sponsorship.
Mhm.
We need to understand why would the company sponsor something, and then there's always opportunities some way here or there to save money or to save on resources. So I think it's just one of those kind of practices that's practical and at the same time is good for any organization you're in.
Yeah,
Um,
I
the
think so.
last thing, and it's kind of funny because my husband and I were just talking about this not that long ago. But we both kind of mentor different people in different points in their lives, and one of them I know that a lot of people have heard about. It's important about who you know. It's not just what you know, but the other piece that's actually sometimes more important is who knows you, like who is going to be advocating for you, who is going to be speaking about you. And so, take the time to kind of get a feel for, wow, okay, who really knows me and who is going to be that sponsor for me in the community and the company. And it's important to cultivate relationships along the way and not just look at relationships like if somebody reports to you, but, like a sphere of
Yeah, yeah.
relationships,
And
around you, below. But I mean, I have great people who I consider my mentors, and they're younger than me.
yeah, I love my young mentors.
Yeah,
We just had
exactly.
one on the phone because we were trying to fix this video. The thing that I think is so important, Marianne, in what you're saying is that, if you work in a school, get on a committee. If you work in a nonprofit, get on a nonprofit board or get on some sort of, program planning committee,
Right.
use your
Get
leadership
engaged.
skills wherever you are. If you're in a corporation, get on the Hispanic ERG, the Employee Resource Group. That's how you get noticed. You
Yeah.
get noticed by doing the work.
Yeah, you
And
get you
that's
get
what leaders
noticed.
do, but find a place that matches your passion, that where you feel you can make, and that
Right.
not only improves your skills, but builds your network, gets you noticed, and then prepares you for your next step.
Yeah.
Because
And it also does another thing too, Juana, is that, I remember when I early on in my career and I was working at a public relations firm in Sacramento, I volunteered to help with the American Heart Association walk. I knew the public relations side of it, so I helped with that. But then as the years went on, I became a board member of the California affiliate for the Heart Association. And I joined committees where I didn't have expertise so that I could learn. So I got myself on the finance and budget committee. I got myself on, an HR committee. And that's how I also learned, so that one, I learned about different arenas without having going back to school. I didn't get that kind of skill from the job that I had at the time, but I learned a little bit, and at the same time, I was contributing to the organization. So, there are opportunities for you to contribute, but also look strategically at where also you can also learn from that experience.
Oh, that's a great, great thing to do. And I think if you're in your neighborhood, you can be on a neighborhood council. If you have a church, you can do that. But the main thing I want the women to walk away with is to really have kind of a plan and to see, because it's not only that you're contributing, but you're learning to serve.
Right.
And in the Latino community, leadership is about serving others. And I think that's such a great training ground. And to have that balance, I'm serving and I'm learning. I'm
Right.
serving, but I'm growing my network. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
I'm serving, but look at the opportunities I have to be able to really grow myself as a
Yeah.
person,
And the more
and to give
that you're
back, to have that sense of gratitude.
and the opportunities that you have to serve, I mean, over time, right? As we were talking about earlier, change is not easy. It's the everyday constant. But think about, what you contribute and what you learn, because every day there's an opportunity, or depending on your role, maybe it's in a few months or in another year, you're going to be teaching in some way. You're going to be
Yeah,
training somebody. You're
yeah.
going to be helping somebody, right? So you have more to offer by learning and sharing, right? And when you start to pass it on to someone else, and you realize, oh man, how did I learn this? Oh, I learned this when I did this, or I learned this when I helped Juana, or I learned that because Juana told me about this book. So there's a lot of different ways to learn and to contribute.
Yeah, and I was also going to say that, way back in the 70s when we started nonprofits here, I would go to the women, and when I started Mikasa Women's Center, I would say, you're going to learn to run a corporation.
Yeah, right.
I mean, think about it. If we really want to have influence, we have to understand organizations. We have to understand organizational development. We have to understand strategic planning. We have to understand budgets. And don't get overwhelmed, folks. Mary Ann and I have been here a long time, and it's paso a paso, little by
Exactly.
little,
Exactly.
skills.
Exactly.
And you're doing fabulous by listening to this webinar and these series. You're showing your leadership, but it is that whole idea that when you serve, as the Bible says, you get back more than you give.
Yes, you do. Yes,
That's just such a beautiful thing. Well, tell us, about your purpose and your vision for the future, Mary Ann.
So
You've done so much.
my purpose has been, quite honestly, kind of back to the way that I was born and raised, and I think it was probably shortly after college graduation that I finally accepted it. And then it finally dawned on me, I guess I'm kind of pretty good at this stuff. But my purpose is really to help cultivate others to find, their maximum potential on this life journey. And I really hope that everybody who I help along the way, that I really shorten their success trajectory. I really looked at, growing up, I prayed and I prayed for a big brother and a big sister, but that's not how it works. But along the journey, I had great mentors who were women who were wiser, had more experience, and I count a few of those still. I call them big sisters and big brothers as well.
Well, we have comadres.
Yes, yes. And so for me, it really has been in the coaching ontological coaching program that I took a couple of years ago. Someone asked me, how I measured success and what was the dollar value and all these other things. And I said, I don't measure success like that. I measure success on how many people I have helped. How many people have I helped every day? I actually have a planner, a journal, and I write the name of at least one person at the end of each day that I helped. And sometimes it's just that I help myself. That I help somebody
That's
that day.
beautiful.
And that to me is the measurement of success and what I want to leave behind and my purpose.
Okay, you said something real important that I want to add before we close. How do you take care of yourself? Because you said to write something down, I helped myself. So what are some ways? Because we've been talking a lot about that because, women do tend to be givers, and we do need to take care of ourselves, especially if you want to be leading throughout your life and not get burnt out.
Yeah.
So
I think that there's a couple, the two big ones I think that come to mind is, and it took me some practice, but learn to say no. Learn to really, part of it is know what your purpose is, know what is important, what you value. And then you have to be really good about saying no. I would love to go to that, but I'm not able to attend. Or I would love to help you with that, but my priority right now is to finish blah, blah, blah. Because it's okay to say no.
yes.
And we're not always taught that, or we're kind of shamed into it, or we feel guilty. But learn to say no as a point of it is an answer. It is a response. It is a way to take care of yourself. And I think the other is to really figure out what to do in moments of silence and have silent moments. Like it could be just a time to yourself in the shower. It could be you park the car and you just sit there for a few more minutes just for yourself. It could be you finish a meeting, and before you jump to the next thing, you take a pause for yourself for 5 minutes. It could be getting up and stretch for 5 minutes. Whatever it is,
Taking 3 deep breaths is always a really good one.
I mean, we need to take the time, because no matter how good we are, we're going to be of no good if we're not taking care of ourselves.
Right. That's Beautiful. You're also a great journaler. You like to journal, correct?
Yes, I do. I journal quite a bit. I love it. I use it just to get some thoughts out. I journal while I'm listening to service on Sundays. I go back and I read the notes. Sometimes it's just whatever comes to my mind, and then I get like an idea out of it. So,
Right.
I've just always been a big journal person. That's just one of my ways that I kind of get my thoughts out, and also use the time to reflect.
Yeah. Well, and what I really like, because that I'm an extrovert and I have to practice those moments of silence, those moments of being alone, those moments of journaling. And so a really good leadership thing is to know yourself well enough to know what is it that's going to feed your soul. And
Right.
I think, but regardless of that, if you don't have that moment to center yourself before you go into a meeting, before you talk to your daughter about the rules of the house, which I had a really good time with 3 daughters, before you talk to your special someone, before you make a decision, take the time to pause and let your intuition and the inner self and your
Right.
incredible experience surface, because if we're going too fast, we're going to make too many mistakes,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. And then sometimes, sometimes I think that we get excited when people ask us for our opinion, our thought, our contributions, and sometimes we contribute more than is necessary.
Yes.
So I think that
Guilty as
again,
charged.
yeah, and sometimes I do that too, right? I mean, trust me, there's been many times when my husband will say, and the point is, right? And I'm like, wait, I'm still telling my story, you know? And so again, know your audience, know the context. Are you sharing? Are you contributing? Are you, think about what are you going to say and what is the desired outcome of your sharing, of your expression? Are you asking for help? Are you solving a problem? And so, this also comes back to what Juana says. You gotta know yourself, and ourselves evolve as well. I'm not the same person I was when I was growing up in the farm worker camp. I'm not the same person, even 5 years ago. So also give yourself grace. Give yourself grace to grow and give yourself permission to learn.
Okay, ladies, I want you to think about this, mujeres, especially what Mary Ann is saying about giving yourself grace to grow, accepting yourself, loving yourself, understanding nobody's perfect, and that
Right.
we're all on this life journey together to learn, and that by being kind and compassionate to each other, we can get a lot further. And so, what I want you to take away from today is this beautiful life journey that Mary Ann's been on, and her generosity towards others, because that's really what leadership is about. It's not about me or you or Mary Ann. It's about how can we create this
Yeah.
society where people are taken care of, where people are valued, where people are seen. And that's kind of our job, particularly as Latinas, to move that forward, because it really is the corazon of our culture to really care for people. So, Mary Ann, thank you so much for everything you do and everything you've done for decades and decades. At the end of her interview, there'll be ways to get a hold of her, but just make sure that you follow those 5 steps that she gave you to increase your career, to enhance your power, and to make it even easier for you to become the incredible woman that you already are. Or to accept the incredible woman.
Love you, Juana. Thank you so much.
I love it, all
Look
of you,
forward
and
to
thank
getting
you all.
questions and feedback.
Yeah, thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you at the next